Hey, Alexa, it's so awesome to have you on the Everything Saxophone Podcast. You are our 100th guest.
No way! That's amazing. Thank you, Donna.
I
Thank
wanted
you.
to tell you that here. I didn't want to tell you beforehand. So, yeah, I mean, you've done so many amazing things. You're such an amazing player, and I thought it'd be awesome to have you as my 100th guest.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad we could make it happen. And I've loved checking out Everything Saxophone and happy to be a part of it.
Cool. All right. So we were, guys, we were just kind of chatting just for a little bit before, getting a little laughs in and all that kind of stuff. But I want to start off with this question. So, do you know how to solfege? I'm sorry I had to do that. And why am I asking that, guys? Here's why. Because my friend Rulon Brown from Key Leaves said, hey, have you checked out Alexa's series on So You Think You Can Solfege? I'm like, no, I didn't see it yet. And I checked it out. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe she's like, singing solfege to bebop, and she's scatting bebop, and it's like, oh my God, where did that come from? And then I have to ask, do you have perfect pitch?
That's a great question. I don't have perfect pitch. I think I just have like a relative pitch situation. I was trained in solfege from a very young age. So like in my general music classes, we learned typical, like kind of standard solfege. It was very much a curriculum based in playing and learning by ear.
Awesome.
And so I think I just developed strong relative pitch over the years. And plus with transcribing and all that stuff, it just became something that was second nature. But I did realize in my master's degree at Juilliard that I was kind of like, does other people don't hear things in solfege syllables? Like, I don't know how I guess I must have been in one of the ear training classes, which was really like a boot camp at Juilliard. It was an awesome class. And we would do different experiments. The teacher would say like, okay, he would just plunk out a note on piano and you would have to say what it was, like la or so or whatever it might be. And then he would say, sing up a minor sixth. And so then you'd have to like just with no reference, you'd sing up the minor sixth and have to say the correct solfege syllable. So it was really good training, and it's been very helpful for me as I, just work on learning things in all the keys, just work on understanding chromatic bebop lines and all that stuff.
When you think, okay, so when you're doing solfege or, you're, how do I want to word this? Because you mostly play alto saxophone, which is an E flat based instrument. Okay, so this is where a lot of people get messed up, especially if they have perfect pitch, which you said you don't. You have very good relative pitch. So you were first taught solfege, at a young age. Was it movable do or fixed do?
It was movable do at a young age, and then in college it became fixed do in like classical theory classes. But then the music education department was always asking us to teach, because I did a music education degree as well. They were movable do.
Okay.
And Juilliard was fixed do. So I've gone back and forth and back and forth.
That's not easy. People don't realize that's really not easy. I didn't have any solfege training, but in college, I went to Queens College. It was movable do, but I studied with Vince Panzarella, and it was fixed do. And that was just like really tough, just that little part. So, gosh, I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was kind of like an identity crisis. It's like it's like a musical identity crisis. But then I figured out really what I'm hearing is, so I basically hear everything in concert B flat do. So I hear everything as it relates to my G on alto. And I think that's because that's really one of the first notes that you learn. It's the note that you tune to in band class every day, through all the way through school as a kid. And so I just internalized concert B flat as like my do.
Okay, that was my next question, because I was thinking to myself, does she hear as an alto saxophone player, or does she hear in concert pitch? Because again, and you double. So we're going to talk about that too, because when you double, and you're doubling on, instruments that are B flat bass, like a clarinet, or C bass that are flute, or, or whatever, it can get a little messy. So that was going to be my next question. I'm glad that you answered that. All right. So I actually want to dive more back into, where you're from. How did you start music? Did you start on a different instrument other than saxophone? Let us know.
Awesome. So I grew up in West Hartford, Connecticut,
Okay.
um, near New York, and my parents are not musical, but I apparently did have music on, uh, in, grandparents and further back. Um, so I started on alto saxophone and piano at the same time because my one of my grandmothers was a pianist. I didn't know her, but I heard the stories, and so I think my parents just maybe heard from friends that it was a good idea to start people on piano. And so that was a really helpful skill for me to have. And the school system that I grew up in, West Hartford Public Schools, just happened to be really, really strong with jazz education, just like as a public school system, very weirdly strong with jazz. And I actually, my first time seeing somebody play the saxophone, I think I must have been in the third grade. I went with my parents to the local high school jazz concert that they put on every year. And they would put on like a big show. They would bring in guests from New York like Phil Woods, Curtis Fuller, like amazing people. And it would be a whole production, like a whole thing. And I saw a young woman play the saxophone and I was just like totally into it. And so it's pretty amazing to me now thinking back like wow, the first person I saw play the saxophone was a woman, which is very inspiring when you think about, the how it's very much a male portrayed instrument. Um so that's pretty, I don't know, that's my story. Actually, that saxophonist, that's Erica von Kleist. I don't know if you have heard her, but she's fantastic.
That's great that she's still playing, and that you had that again, like you said, you had that influence. And as a woman, I could tell you from my own experience growing up playing trumpet, I did not have that. All I saw were men playing the instrument. So it's so empowering. And today, just as a point of reference, we're filming this the day that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are being sworn in. And we were just talking about that a few seconds ago and how inspiring that's going to be for young African American, young Asian girls to see this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very moving thing to see.
Absolutely. Now, West Hartford is a great community. Hart School of Music is there, so I've taken numerous courses there, and I love West Hartford. And so, what's really great is that you have such a strong background in school. Did you start studying with anybody privately?
I started, I think, at the local music shop, and then moved to the Hart School. I remember I was studying like classical saxophone, just kind of standard stuff. And then I didn't love that so much, I don't think. I then moved into middle school and started studying privately with kind of the local jazz teacher that would mentor the high school saxophonists. Um, it's kind of funny, like the once you were in the high school jazz bands, there was like a particular teacher that was sort of like recommended as a private teacher if you were interested, or a couple of teachers. So around eighth grade I started doing that, and then moved into really studying quite seriously privately jazz on saxophone and clarinet and flute as well in high school.
Oh wow! So already you were doubling at that point.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Did you participate in any kind of like like summer programs, or because there's a bunch of them that go on around the Hart School, but also you're so close to New York as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So I went to the Litchfield Jazz Camp in Litchfield, Connecticut, and then for a few years, and also the Skidmore Jazz Institute, which was up in Saratoga Springs, New York, which was an amazing experience. And then also Jazz in July was up at UMass Amherst. Um, yeah, they were. That was like a real highlight, I think, for me because it was just an opportunity to meet people all over the country that had the same interest, and it was like, really, there are more of us, you know?
Yeah. And what's great too, and what, if you don't mind my asking, like what around what years was this?
Of course, yeah. So I graduated high school in 2010.
You have to
I'm
remember
sure
that.
I'm 28 years old, so it's like always weird to think that I graduated from high school in the 2000s because I feel like I'm older than that. Um, and so I graduated college in 2014. So yeah, that would have been like 2005 through 2008. We're looking at like middle school and early high school jazz programs. Yeah.
The reason why I asked, like what, years, just as a frame of reference, because I was also thinking, I've had a number of guests on the show who have actually taught at Litchfield or taught at some of these summer camps. And, they probably may have influenced you, but I don't know if they taught during those particular times.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there was an amazing roster. Well, Lauren Sevian, for one, she was there when I was there. She was teaching, and that's kind of where we first met. And Claire Daly, um, Mario Pavone, Chris Allen, Jimmy Green, I believe. Um, so many great people were there.
That's awesome. And you know what? We're going to just take a right turn as I'm pointing to the right. Let's talk about Lauren Sevian, who I've had as a guest here. We had a fun time. Just, we have a lot of mutual connections because we're both from Long Island. But let's talk about how, again, you guys met and, the things that you guys are doing today.
Lauren is so great. I feel really lucky to have her as such a close friend and a musical partner. She's been a real inspiration to me, like I said, since I first met her at Litchfield. And, we're not that far apart in age, which is why it's so funny, like that I could have been there, kind of studying, and she was a young faculty member. So we connected first there, and then we reconnected when we started playing with the Diva Jazz Orchestra as the band was supporting Maurice Hines in one of his musical shows. And so we traveled with that show for a while, and so we got really close and just played together every night, and we just were like we were on the same wavelength with everything, just like pitch, articulate. It was just like everything was in sync. And so we said, okay, we need to do more. So we started a quintet called LSAT, Lauren Sevian, Alexa Tarantino. And from there, we started, I guess we won a competition in New York that was a jazz competition. And then that led us to kind of play some other places, Dizzy's Club, the Rochester Jazz Festival. And we had some things coming up, of course, not anymore due to COVID, but we are hoping to make a new record at some point, and you can hear a little bit of our stuff on her record, Bliss, which is primarily her music, but features both of us on a couple tracks. And then there's a group called Lioness that Lauren has spearheaded with guitarist Amanda Monaco, and so we are playing. I think it's basically LSAT, but a different configuration, but the two of us in the front line for two tunes on the Lioness record.
Cool. And yeah, I've definitely checked out some of the recordings, and also on YouTube when you guys were, I don't know if it was at Dizzy's, now I forget, but I saw Lioness and I was like, this is really inspiring. It just was so awesome to see you guys. And I think it's such a great connection. It's, when you said like, when it comes to pitch and articulation, you just clicked. And, it reminds me of like, when you think about like sports, right? Pitcher catcher, right? Or even like, beach volleyball, when you find that right partner, and just you're in sync.
Mm-hmm.
Did you both just know that, or I guess it just came organically?
Yeah, I guess it just happened because we were playing the same, show every night, but it was like still fun every time. And so I guess that was kind of a sign. And we just loved hanging out. With our other kind of partner in crime was Roxy Koss on tenor saxophone in that show. And I mean, it was just an amazing experience to be on tour, be traveling and have like such great close friends there with you. We were kind of like, oh yeah, this is what it's like for all the guys in jazz all the time. They're just hanging out with their friends. So it was really nice, and helped to not only foster great personal but musical relationships too.
Cool. And going along this track too, before we head back to your past. Okay, so you guys were going to make a record, but are there any plans, have you talked lately? Are there any plans to do something during this like quarantine period here in 2021?
Um, I think we are looking at recording in 2021. We did actually, something was just released with a band called the Generation Gap Jazz Orchestra, and that's led by trumpeter Bijan Watson and pianist Stephen Feifke. And so they put together this big band of like just a variety of players from all ages, scenes, geographical areas, just like a real like all-star. It's an awesome group of people that they put together. And then Stephen used an arrangement that he wrote for LSAT on Inner Urge, and he expanded it as a big band arrangement. So there's a virtual big band kind of LSAT feature out there somewhere. I can send you the link.
Yeah, please do, and I'll put it in the show notes. That's awesome. All right, cool. All right, now I'm going to dive back, take that left turn now, go back, and great high school system in West Hartford. When, and what made you decide to go down the path of being a musician?
So I just got the bug, and I just knew that was it. It was pretty crazy. 5th grade, I think, I just said to my parents, that's what I'm going to do. And so it was, I guess it wasn't a hard decision because it was the only thing I was really excited about. I always liked languages too, and I liked math, but I thought maybe I would be a teacher if not a musician, maybe a music teacher or a teacher of languages or something. But I think it was around early high school when people are talking about college and what you're going to do next, and I just decided, you only live once, life is too short to not like really go for it. And I just was like, let me see if I can try this whole performance thing, and if it doesn't work out, I mean I never like to use teaching as a fallback per se, because I think we need to be so appreciative of our teachers, especially our public school teachers. But I really wanted to try to get absolutely as strong as I could as a performer and see if I could make that happen. And I knew that I loved teaching regardless, so that it would be fine. But I really wanted to like put myself in a position to get my butt kicked, in terms of getting better at saxophone. So that's why I chose to go to Eastman for school.
Oh, Eastman's such a great school. And, you said something interesting. You chose to get your butt kicked. Can we, can we talk about that mindset? Because I know for a lot of people, people are starting up on whether it's saxophone or any instrument at all ages, and a lot of people lately, especially with COVID, and, people realizing there's not, you have one life to live, right? You even kind of said it, and why not go for it? But sometimes people are really afraid to perform in public, can you talk about that kind of mindset, since you kind of alluded to it, saying, oh, I prepared myself to get my butt kicked?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just is the idea that you want to grow and you want to learn, and you don't want to, play it safe all the time. And so being open to other people's perspectives and open to other people's knowledge was really important, and being able to take criticism, appropriately, was really, those are all things that I think like going to a conservatory and getting the feedback, those are all things that those little muscles that you develop, like criticism and being open to perspectives and all that stuff. But when you're performing, you really have to like be strong and put it all out there and just like be unabashedly presenting yourself. So, which I like connecting with the audience, and I like making people feel something. I like making people happy. So I always knew that I loved to perform. I guess it was always just a question of, was I at the level where people would want to buy a ticket to see me perform?
Oh, they certainly do.
and so that's what I think that decision was like, is this really something that I can go for? And like, can you really with all the zillions of saxophonists in the world, and artists in the world, all the great art and music that's being made, do I have a voice that's people want to hear? So it was a lot about developing not only your technical facility and your concept as a improviser, but also like your stage presence and your reputation and the way you present yourself on and off the stage, and knowing how to get people excited about what you're doing. So it's really like a full operation. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's dig into that. That full operation. So, how did you develop your voice? And if you could also talk about this full operation, like where did you learn, what to do with stage presence? And, this also goes into marketing yourself, and it's not just being a musician, it's being a business person too.
Um, well, I think I was lucky because my parents they're really supportive, even though this is a very non-traditional field. But they're very like, if you're gonna do something, you're gonna do it 110%, And so it was never like an option for me growing up to do something and really like kind of wish wash out of it or whatever. It was just like you're gonna go for it all the way. And so I think also it comes with a type of confidence, but also a humility, like, being able to stand up and on stage confidently, but also to be humble, to be able to kind of like laugh at yourself on stage. And if you make a mistake or you count off something too fast, or, making a joke to the people, like really being able to just have a joyous and light rapport. And I think that's something that you just develop with people naturally, like off, it depends. It comes from, I think, your relationships with people in general. I think we've all seen shows where somebody just kind of like comes up and doesn't really say anything and just plays. And that can be very interesting actually at times, but a lot of times that I think you're losing the personal connection and you're actually putting up a wall of listener versus performer. And I really like for us to all feel like we're in it together. So in terms of the full operation, I guess that means like for me, it was always really important to go out and talk to people after, even if it was my school concerts in college. Like I would just go stand out in the hallway and say hi to like the local elderly couples that just like to get out and see some jazz, and then I would get their email and write to Susie and Rich, when for my own things that were going on, and they would come out and see me. And so it was just about wanting to connect with people beyond the commercial aspect or beyond the sort of audience member and artist aspect.
You know what's interesting about that? I think back to like many of the concerts I saw when I was younger, and while some of those artists did, talk to the audience a little bit, it's not to the extent. I think it's a lot different now than it was, back in the '90s, and I guess that's for me, be the late '80s and stuff like that. It's a different kind of vibe, and I think social media has a big impact on that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think social media has a huge impact on how people view you, because they feel like they're right there with you with whatever you're doing, and so you can really bring people along for the ride in the way that you want, or you can choose to present yourself a different way. I think a lot of people now, with the instant gratification and being able to see who their artists are playing with or what they're doing or what they're releasing, all this instant stuff, I do think it's important to try to, if you want to maintain that connection with an audience, you do have to kind of go along with the social media thing. But for me, like really just value the feeling of the crowd in person, and like getting to go and shake people's hands, which feels like so long ago. But going to just like shake people's hands and hear what people thought about the music. People might ask like, what was that song again? That really felt great. And I loved that. Or, oh my gosh, like everybody's just so in sync with each other. And sometimes like the feedback is really interesting and actually helps to figure out the next performance.
Um, I'm gonna dive ahead a little bit. You said something very interesting that you like that that live connection, performing live, because you can, be around people. How are you coping now during COVID? We're coming up to like close to a year with this.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I mean, yeah, I feel like I'm just now I feel lucky because I feel like the beginning of it was, okay, I'm home. This is nice. Like I'm not traveling that much. Wow, like I can watch TV. I can, plant a plant or whatever. And now I'm kind of like going crazy. I'll be completely honest with everybody at Everything Saxophone. I feel like I'm going crazy. I just can't seem to I'm like, is this over yet? What are we doing? And I know everybody, I'm very lucky. I cannot complain, but I know a lot of people are going through really tough times. So I guess all I can say is I'm with you all. I'm with everybody, and I'm really looking forward to getting back. I think the virtual stuff is great, but to spend X amount of time on something and then you don't get to really feel the audience feedback or the rapport or the energy, and so it's kind of like you're just putting things out and you're just letting it go, and it doesn't really. Whoever watches it, and maybe you hear from somebody who's watched it, but it's kind of like, oh, I hope people like that.
Yeah, yeah. You just reminded me of something too, in saying, in terms of doing like the virtual stuff and virtual concerts, and we're going to talk about what you have done and how you've dealt with COVID musically. But like I know for myself, doing a lot of videos, there's no interaction, and I know for me it's really hard because I also miss performing and seeing people and all that kind of thing, and you don't have that energy to draw from. So when you're doing the types of virtual concerts that you're doing, how do you conjure up that vibe, the energy, so that it can be like you're out there live? How do you do that for yourself?
um Well, there have been times where I've done it and I haven't done it. So I can say I'm not always super consistent, but what has helped me is like actually getting dressed up, putting on a little makeup and jewelry or whatever, and making sure like working on the lighting and really making it feel like you're walking into a real event, making myself a drink like tea or a cocktail, whatever it might be, like feeling like I'm at a little club, and um I'm really lucky because pianist Stephen Feifke and I have been doing a quarantine concert series this whole time. So a lot of people haven't been able to perform with anybody. So I've been really lucky that I've been able to make music still during this time. So that's helpful. But I think the exciting thing about the virtual stuff is these chat features on a lot of these platforms. So we've been using Crowdcast, and with the chat feature, people can tune in and say like, "Oh, I love those earrings, Alexa," or "Oh my gosh, that piece was so great," and how's everybody's week? Oh, I'm drinking a Negroni over here, like and then everybody in the chat has this little community vibe. So they come back the week after week and they're like, "Hey Bob, how was your game last week or whatever?" And it's kind of fun to see that little community, and also to not have to take off my slippers.
And if you were wearing pajamas, people wouldn't know it.
Exactly.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Listen, so with your quarantine concerts, talk a little bit about this. Are you guys, so people can get a point of reference, are you in the same studio together? How are you making this work?
Yeah, so well, we share an apartment in New York City, and so we have a dedicated music space, music room, that we've hooked up with all the studio recording equipment, and so it's been really great. I think it was March 13th was like our first concert right when this started, just before it hit, or as everything was hitting, and we started just with a MacBook and nothing else. We didn't have any microphones at first.
Right.
And then, Stephen really did a lot of research in terms of equipment and things. And I knew the type of mics that I had played at certain venues. But we, did a lot of asking around in terms of what was best for a home studio setup. And so we kind of made that investment, which of course was totally worth it. So, mics, the audio interface, a little bit of lighting, and microphone stands and all that stuff. And so we just started every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern on Crowdcast. And for a while, I think we just did our 38th or our 39th concert, which is crazy to think that we've been here that long. For a while, we were doing themes like Charlie Parker or, music of Gershwin, whatever it is. And so we would do lots of different themes. We're still sort of doing themes, but also kind of just calling tunes now to keep it like a variety, like a wild card. And then we donate 25% of proceeds to organizations that are making the world a better place, whether it's through Black Lives Matter foundations or artist relief funds, or to jazz clubs that are in need of it right now. So it's been a really nice way for us to give back, and also it's been very helpful for us during this time when there's no work, but mostly to develop that connection, as you mentioned.
So what is your, I know people are going to ask, what is your setup? What is the studio setup?
Okay, great. Yeah, so I have a Neumann TLM 103 is the mic that I use. And that's obviously, that's obviously a higher ticket item investment. But I also enjoy, playing like even just a Shure, like an SM 57 or 58, I think works, in many settings. I don't have one. I decided to go for the Neumann because I knew through this time that I would potentially be doing like some like real like recording projects. I was making a record, and I knew I was going to make the record in studio, but there was a chance that I would have to do some of it maybe from home. And so I just didn't want to risk quality. And so that's paid off just because it works for flute, clarinet, saxophone, even just speaking in situations. It's great. Then we use a Focusrite interface, audio interface. One thing that I got recently from a family member who works in technology, he sent us this Sennheiser disc. It's like a little portable speaker, like this size, and it's a USB, just plugs in, and it's called a conference call speaker. And it's usually, I could plug it in, actually, probably, use it for interviews or I use it for private lessons because it just amplifies the student's sound a little bit better, and it helps for when I'm maybe teaching in a different room or I'm not using the whole full setup. It's like it gives me a good enough sound on alto as I'm playing into the mic.
Oh, okay. So are you saying that's like okay, would you plug that, is it USB or would you plug it into the Scarlett? And is it like it's like another type of microphone? Is that what you're saying?
So yeah, so basically I have like two setups. I have the setup that I use in the music studio, so that's like with the Scarlett, the Focusrite, and the Scarlett with the connecting to a computer and hardwired internet, and then feeding the Neumann sound through, and then we have piano mics, and so that all goes through into the computer. But if I don't want to be so fancy, I'll just use this USB plugging into my computer, and it's a compact kind of thing, like a little hockey puck, and I could use that anywhere. I mean, I could use it if I was FaceTiming family. I could use it if I was in the living room teaching a saxophone lesson, and I knew I was going to do some playing and some talking, but I didn't need like studio quality playing. It's just like a little more comfortable because I like to stand or sit or whatever, and it's just like too much to fiddle with for private teaching for me with all the Focusrite and feeding it all through. So I would rather just be able to like pick my computer up with this little hockey puck and move around as needed.
That's interesting. I've not heard of that. And you find that the sound quality is good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I use it for my master classes. Most of my master classes that I give, I will use that. And yeah, it's really good. I can check the like actual numbers on the item. Sennheiser SP10 ML, M as in Mary. Yeah, it's just like a small little conference call speaker. So it's worked out really well because I can give a master class. I can sit here and talk, and you'd get a nice vocal sound. And then when I play, I don't have to adjust anything. I can just be right here. As opposed to for our concerts, we use a Neumann, and then we have a Shure microphone that we talk with, and it's like back and forth and back and forth. And I would rather just be a little more casual, I think, for a lot of the other engagements that I'm doing.
Okay, this is me being selfish. I wanted to definitely know about this too because
Yay!
no, because the thing is that, you know, I'm using an Audio Technica AT2035. It's a great microphone, but the thing is that, you're kind of attached to the microphone. So having something where you can be a little bit more free, you don't have to be on top of the microphone the whole time. You're nodding
Yeah.
your head, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I want to be able to go like, yeah, or like, stand up or whatever. And if I'm playing, not having to like switch mics and adjust the volume and stuff. So it works really well.
So it adapts to, like 1 minute you're playing the flute, the next minute the saxophone. It doesn't distort in any way.
I guess I would have to ask the people who are listening. But I'm not using it for like really, I'm using it for like demonstrating or for like playing a tune when I'm kicking off a master class. So I'll sit there and like play confirmation and it's really great. And then I'm like, hi, everybody. Don't change a thing. It's still very clear and everybody's hearing everything not distorted. But yeah, I imagine I haven't done too much flute stuff with it. Most of my teaching is saxophone and clarinet, but I imagine it would be similar.
Awesome. And this, I think, is also a great resource for people to know about too, because, even though things are going to start to open up probably in 6 months or so, there's still people online and they're looking for solutions and they're looking for things that maybe aren't as expensive as getting a Neumann mic,
Mhm.
so I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think also the teachers that are listening right now are really attuned, no pun intended, attuned to what you just said, because again, we all want to know about ways to make things a little bit more efficient, but also sound, equally as good. And speaking of teaching too, so you also teach, you do some stuff for, I think it's Jazz at Lincoln Center, and you have your own students. I also know because on Long Island, you're also going to be presenting there as well about 251s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love Long Island. I am there probably a couple times a year because I do. I'm very lucky to have connected with the people in Suffolk County.
Yeah.
So Dan Belaski and Pat Eisenberg, just like such a great community of educators and such great students. It's really inspiring to go out and work with them. So I think last year I was one of their all county directors and I've done some master classes or some clinicking. And so they're putting on the SCMEA is what they call it, Suffolk County Music Educators Association Day of Jazz, and it's virtual this year. So I'll be giving, yes, a class on 251s for beginners and beyond. And basically what I'm presenting is material from a new ebook that I've put out, which I can send the link as well. That's called Express Jazz Vocab. And basically the concept with this just came from, I was just like working with students and trying to get their vocabulary to just move up to the next level at a higher rate than it was. And so I started giving examples of, okay, here's a really simple way to navigate a 251. Something like that, all quarter notes. And then I would say, or you can do this. And that's, embellished, filling in the gaps a little bit more. That's like level 2. And that's more eighth notes. And then I would say, level 3 of that line might be something that you're really used to hearing on records and stuff. Something like that. And so basically just trying to show students like, yeah, you hear that and you think that's really cool and you think it's very complicated and you don't know where it's coming from. But if you thin it out to step 2, thin it out again down to step 1, really the voice leading that's happening is this. And you can get there basically. So this new book has 24 pieces of vocabulary out in all 12 keys, and it's available for different instruments. And yeah, the idea is just that I'm kind of creating vocabulary based on different concepts. So I'll do one section of 2/5s on using certain extensions, like using the sharp 11 or using the flat 9 or something like that. Then I'll do one on just using the bebop scale, really getting used to the dominant chord. do another one, maybe trying to add some more rhythmic syncopation. So just like different ideas to get people thinking, and then they can take the lines and really like add to them or stretch them out and make them more their own.
You know what it sounds like too that you're doing, as any good teacher does. You start off with the foundation, and with that foundation, you're hearing the skeleton of it, and then you're showing like the little embellishments, but the skeleton is still there. And then, then real life application, so to speak, although any of those are real life application, depending on what level you're playing at. But, like the third level would be, again, like you said, what you'd hear on a record. But by having gone through that foundation, then it just makes more sense, and then they're hearing it more. And what was really cool that you did, although you didn't solfege it, that's okay. Just kidding. I know you could do it, but you nailed it. I mean, you just you sang what you heard in your head, and I wanted to talk about two things. Number one, it's a big pain point for people to be able to play what they hear in their head. That's the first thing. So like just some tips for that for people, but also how important is it for you or even for your students to be able to sing these exercises, or do you have them sing this stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the first thing that needs to happen. Definitely. I guess for me, when I was learning tunes and like learning vocabulary right off the bat, I would always sing it first, especially with tunes. I would always like try to learn the lyrics first, or at least just kind of sing the lines, because it helps me to internalize it more. And I would often just kind of sit there and sing and finger along, even if, for something like confirmation, or whatever it is, and slowly until I could work it up to tempo. And then, because when you're playing it, you're adding in like articulation, you're adding in air and sound and intonation. There are all these other factors that start to cloud whether or not you really know the line and the rhythm of it and what buttons you're pressing.
And by ear?
Yes. Yeah, by ear as much as possible. I mean, of course, there were times where I had like sheet music for things, or lead sheets for things, but I think learning things by ear is the best way.
And did you always learn things by ear? Like when did you first start learning jazz, and how did you learn it? How were you exposed to it?
Well, we started learning things by ear even from elementary school general music. I remember actually elementary school band, we would like learn songs, just wrote songs like Hot Cross Buns, Mary Had a Little Lamb, Happy Birthday, all those things. Then you figure them out in different keys, because you're familiar with the melody and you know how it's supposed to go. Yeah, it's great. It's the best way, I think, to really develop that strong sense of pitch and melody. We had a jazz band at that age too, and I think we just played like really fun and simple and light charts, C jam blues, things like that. And so that helped to instill the sense of rhythm and syncopation and swing.
This is so interesting because this is exactly what I taught my kids back on Long Island. Exactly the same types of things. So I'm curious about, and I don't know if you're aware of it. I was trained with music learning theory by Dr. Edwin Gordon. It sounds almost like.
That's exactly what I was. Yes.
Yes.
That's exactly what I was trained in. Yeah, because
there we go.
Dr. Rich Kangro was my teacher in elementary school, and I didn't know that that's what this was, music learning theory. And then when I went to Eastman, the teachers there were Dick Gruno and Chris Azera. Yeah. And so Gruno worked with Gordon.
Yep.
Or they worked with Gordon. So yeah, that's the whole thing. I'm with you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so interesting. So I got into music learning theory. I was totally trained the exact opposite way, and then I saw this course that Chris Azera was teaching at Hart during the summer. About teaching improvisation, and that totally changed the way I taught, the way I approached improvisation myself. It changed my life, actually, and my students' lives. And I was thinking to myself, why aren't we all taught this way? And the idea, I mean, now you see the results of what you can do, right? This is music learning theory. It's It's being able to hear what you hear in your head, be able to play it. It's music is an oral art. So as soon as you started talking about this, I'm thinking, okay, she's either had studies with somebody who studied John Firebrand's method, which is popular up there in Connecticut, or it could be music learning theory. And I know Dick Bruno, it took a number of conferences with him, and he's a great guy. They wrote the series Jump Right In, a teacher series. Not easy. It's not user friendly. You do have to get trained in music learning theory in order to be able to use it. But as soon as you started saying, oh yeah, we learned hot cross buns and this and that and happy birthday, and then we started changing the keys, I'm like, yep, that's exactly what I do.
No, it's so funny. They're releasing. I think they just released another Jump Right In for recorder, or maybe a reissue of it. And I did the recorder tracks.
Oh, that's awesome!
Yeah.
That's great.
I'm obsessed. I loved it. I loved the whole method.
Yeah, because it's song based, and it's exactly how a jazz musician would learn if you think about it.
Yeah, it's perfect. And so basically, with my students, I've kind of done a jazz spin-off of I mean, obviously if I'm starting beginners, I'll do, hot cross buns and Mary Had a Little Lamb and stuff, but oftentimes when I'm probably getting like middle school, high school, and they haven't experienced this whole learning by ear thing, so I'll start with tunes like Blue Monk, C Jam Blues, Take the A Train, and then you kind of grow from there.
That's so great. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because this is an awesome connection. And I think it's going to make people very interested in approaching music learning theory. And I can tell you that if you are interested, just check out giml.org. That's GIML, Gordon Institute of Music Learning. .org, and there's a ton of information on there if you're all interested in that. I got certified in teaching the instrumental portion of this. And I'm just thinking, as you're singing, I'm thinking she could be the one singing the next series of books out, with the tonal patterns. I can see you doing that.
No.
That's right. That's right. I know Lisa Cole, who I went to, we called it Saratoga. That's Nissa. I met her there. She's a clarinet player. She married Chris Azera. And so I think she was the one that sang all the tonal patterns in those books.
Yeah. She's amazing. Yeah. And when I was there, I mean, we would just all hang out all the time, like the Azeras and the Gruno. We had a good time. They're great.
Oh, absolutely. And just really great people and just so knowledgeable. It really was like I said, it was an eye opener for me. And now I didn't even know you had music learning theory training. And now I see it. I absolutely see it. And oh my gosh, I don't know if you've shared your Do You Think You Can Solfege videos with Dick and Chris. You probably should.
I wonder if they've seen them. I should send them to them.
Oh, they'd be like proud papas.
I have to do some more. I got to make some more videos too. So it's, we'll see how it goes.
Oh, absolutely. No, those are awesome. And I saw the Donna Lee, Ciora, the one you did with Chad Lefkowicz-Brown, where you were scatting along with him, and then he starts soloing, and then you start scatting, soloing, solfeging.
So funny.
I will put those links in the show notes. I know everybody's going to be seriously interested in that. But going off on a different route just for a second, who are your influences when it comes to a couple of things? Your sound, okay, but also jazz playing and the masters that you followed. Who are your influences?
Phil Woods is my big alto sound influence. Phil Woods, Cannonball, Sonny Stitt, and Kenny Garrett and Dick Oates are probably like my top alto players that I love. Of course, I love Charlie Parker as well. Yes. And that's probably rounding out the alto group. And then for tenors, I feel like I'm almost more influenced by tenor players because I just love the range. I love the deeper sound. And so something about that, like I never wanted my alto sound to be too harsh or too bright or too tinny or high. So I've loved really listening to people like Dexter Gordon, Joe Henderson, and Wayne Shorter. Sorry, this took me. I had their names in my head and then I lost them. But so they're favorites, and then Then I'm also super inspired by kind of like just a different style of playing, like through, Lee Konitz, Jerry Mulligan. Yeah, kind of like that more lyrical, exploratory, the cool jazz era.
What are there other genres that you listen to now that you think may affect the way you write and the way you play?
I mean, I love listening to, The Temptations, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson. Like, I'll put on the 70s stuff a lot when I'm just like hanging out at home. And I also really like to listen to ambient music, just like when I'm working or when I'm chilling out, just like soundscapes and landscape type stuff. So that's kind of fun even to just warm up with, like as little as drones or something. And so they have many different playlists like on Spotify and stuff. And I'm a recent Spotify addition. A lot of people have many feelings about it, but yeah. So I like classical music too. I don't listen to it so much, but I really enjoyed, when I was studying clarinet and flute at a more focused level, like with private teachers in New York City. I would listen to classical performers on those instruments to really get an understanding of the tone and the concept. And so that was always very inspiring.
And we're going to, I know we're on a really tight deadline, so I definitely want to have you on as a guest to talk about doubling because that's a big thing that you do, and you've done clinics on it, and I know people are going to be really curious about it. I do have one more question. What do you see post-COVID, the future of improvised music?
I do see it becoming a little bit more of a I'm envisioning much more multi-genre, multimedia cross collaborations happening because I think so many people are feeling so many things, and that I think the greater appreciation for just art in general is going to be booming when we come back. And I'm hoping that will mean maybe more interest in things that people weren't necessarily interested in before or thought they weren't interested in. So, going to a jazz concert, but perhaps jazz that they might not have thought they were into. You can go to a big band concert, but then if you go to sort of like a more avant-garde or completely improvised set of music, some people might say, oh, that's not for me. And so thinking of that really totally improvised realm, or cross collaborations with dance and art or spoken word, I think that's going to be where it's at, because I think that's going to be like really tuning into what we've all been experiencing and kind of helping people to process and release. I think I'm just looking forward to doing anything with anybody, but particularly I'm looking forward to kind of hopefully coming out of this with compositions that are ready to go, for people to hear. And I think a lot of people will be coming out with just piles and piles of music ready to play and ready to create. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know everybody's going to be looking forward to that and seeing you with your own quintet, with LSAT, with Lioness, with all these collaborations. And I think it's so amazing that, you've put on these quarantine concerts since the middle of March and you guys are still going strong. And, I think it's definitely inspired a lot of people. And you have to definitely put out some more solfege videos. So people can definitely check those out. They're so cool. Listen, Alexa, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so my website's alexatarantino.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but primarily Instagram, just at Alexa Tarantino. My YouTube channel is also under my name, Alexa Tarantino, and yeah, that's everything. On my website, people can find the Crowdcast concerts and upcoming master classes and more.
And they could also sign up as well because you have an email list, I noticed.
Yes, yeah. So all of my updates will go directly out.
Excellent. That's so great. Well, I have to have you on again because we have so much more to talk about. And I'm so grateful that you gave me some time today because you're like in between, students and this and that and whatever. So thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you, Donna. I really appreciate it. And this worked out perfectly. Really, it did. And I'm so grateful. So thank you for sharing my info.